What happens when the world's most feared boxer, Mike Tyson, steps into a foreign land to confront his past? In an emotional journey to Burkina Faso, Tyson finds himself face to face with a president and a young boy whose lives are as scarred as his own. What begins as a typical trip for the legendary fighter becomes a soul-stirring revelation. Through tears, pain, and shared stories, Mike discovers that the greatest battles aren't fought in the ring, they're fought within. President Ibrahim Traoré and a young boy, Maddie, help him understand that true strength is not about physical might, but about rising from pain, embracing vulnerability, and healing. As Tyson steps away from fame and into a new purpose, his journey teaches us all the power of second chances. Don't miss this unforgettable story of redemption, connection, and healing. In a deeply emotional moment, legendary boxer Mike Tyson broke down in tears during a live TV interview after receiving a heartfelt letter from Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. This emotional exchange revealed an unexpected bond and mutual respect between two powerful individuals from completely different worlds. What followed was a tear-jerking moment that left everyone in the studio in complete silence. It started as a typical interview. Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion, had been invited to a popular American morning show to talk about his new memoir and upcoming Netflix documentary. He appeared calm, a little tired, but still sharp. As the cameras began rolling, the host smiled and said, "Mike, you've seen it all. But today we have something you didn't expect." Mike raised an eyebrow and asked, "What's that?" A producer handed the host a cream-colored envelope with gold writing, and the host revealed it was a letter from Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. The letter had arrived the previous night from West Africa. The audience fell into silence, and Mike's expression shifted as his jaw clenched slightly. The host explained that the letter was meant for Mike only, but the president had agreed to let it be read live. Mike nodded slowly, unsure of what to expect, and said, "Go ahead." What happened next was not only surprising, but deeply moving. The letter unlocked something inside Mike, something that had never truly been seen before: the fighter, the showman, but also the broken boy behind the gloves, and the leader who had reached out across continents. The host began reading the letter aloud. "Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Ibrahim Traoré, president of the transition of Burkina Faso. I don't write to you as a politician, but as a boy who once had nothing and saw you fight on a flickering TV in a crowded room." Mike sat stunned, his breathing becoming heavier. The host continued, "You were not just a boxer. You were proof that pain could be turned into power, that a boy from nowhere could stand before giants and make them fall." Mike leaned forward, captivated by the words. "When my country was suffering, I remembered your eyes in the ring. Not your fists, your eyes, full of pain, fire, and the refusal to be broken. Now, I try to lead my people with that same fire." The room was completely silent. The host finished reading, "Thank you, Mike Tyson, for teaching me to rise not as a fighter, but as a man." Mike looked away, his voice cracking. "Stop, just stop for a second," he said, his tears already beginning to form. He tried to smile, but something inside him had broken, and the world was about to see the raw vulnerability that had been hidden for so long. The host gently placed the letter on the table as Mike's hands shook. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the lights. Mike looked down, trying to hold back his tears, but it was no use. They started slow, then came heavy. "He saw me," Mike whispered, choking on his words. "Not the knockouts, not the fame, just me." He wiped his face, but the tears kept falling. "I was 14, homeless, angry. I wanted to die. Back then, nobody knew, nobody cared." The audience gasped. Mike continued, his voice shaking. "I fought because it was the only way anyone could see me." Voice. Mike paused, trying to gather his emotions before responding. "I never thought I'd hear from you. I can't believe it." His voice trembled as he spoke. "I've been watching you for years, Mike," Ibrahim replied, his tone filled with warmth. "What you did, not just in the ring, but with your life. It taught me how to lead, how to rise from nothing." Mike sat back in his chair, his heart heavy but full. "You saw me, Ibrahim. You saw the real me." "Yes," Ibrahim said, "and that's why I had to write to you. You were a boy with nothing, but you became a champion. You gave me hope for my own people. I wanted you to know that." There was a pause as the weight of the words settled between them. Mike wiped his face once again. Though the tears had mostly stopped, "You've made me see it differently. This isn't just about me. It's about what we can do for others. What we've learned, what we've been through." The conversation continued, to men who had never met but shared something deeper now. Something stronger than the physical battles of the past. Back in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim smiled softly as he looked at the photo of a young Mike Tyson on his office wall. It wasn't about the boxing matches. It was about the spirit, the fight for survival, the strength in suffering. The interview continued to spread around the world, touching hearts across continents. Clips of Mike Tyson wiping away tears while reading Ibrahim's letter reached millions. People from all walks of life shared the video. Schools, refugees, celebrities, and it wasn't just about Mike Tyson anymore. It was about a message of survival, hope, and connection. A reminder that pain could be transformed into purpose. Later, that night, after the show had ended and the spotlight faded, Mike sat quietly, reflecting on what had happened. He hadn't just shared his story. He had received one in return. And it wasn't just about boxing or fame, it was about two men, worlds apart, coming together in a moment of raw humanity. The next day, Ibrahim's office was filled with messages from around the world, but for now, he allowed himself the time to sit in the silence of his own thoughts. He had reached out to Mike Tyson in a way that transcended politics, and the world had responded with the same message. We are all connected by our struggles and triumphs. In that moment, both men had found something greater than themselves, a shared bond forged not through fame or power, but through the shared understanding of what it means to rise, no matter the odds. "That's okay," Mike said gently. "Even lions cry." The boy's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, there was no difference between them, two souls bound by pain, but both learning how to carry it. Maddie held his father's picture close to his chest, his small hands trembling. "I miss him," he whispered, barely above a breath. "He told me I could be strong like you." Mike's heart clenched. He placed a hand on Maddie's shoulder. "You are strong, little man, stronger than you'll ever know." The moment was heavy, profound, as if the weight of the world had shifted between them, unspoken but understood. It wasn't about the fighting or the victories. It was about the shared human experience, the kind of strength that comes from surviving, from bearing the scars of life and still rising. As they spent the day with the children, Mike found himself more than just a guest in a foreign land. He became a witness to a shared history, not just of pain, but of resilience. The children, many of whom had seen more suffering in their young lives than most people would in a lifetime, held their heads a little higher when Mike spoke, when he listened. The letters they'd written to him were more than just words. They were the voices of a generation asking to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Later, as the sun set over Ouagadougou, the men sat together, looking out at the vast sky. Ibrahim Traoré, the president of a nation scarred by hardship and strife, turned to Mike. "You see now," he said quietly, "pain connects us more deeply than fame ever could." Mike nodded, his thoughts distant as he held the letters in his hands. He had spent his life fighting for recognition, for glory, for validation. But in this moment, he realized that the true victory was not in a belt, a championship, or a knockout. It was in reaching people, in connecting with them on the deepest level. It was in showing them that even the most broken among us could rise, that no one is alone in their struggle. The letters from the children weighed heavily in his hands, each one a testament to the power of hope. "These," Mike said softly, "are worth more than anything I've ever won in a ring." The silence between them deepened as the wind picked up, rustling the papers in Mike's hands. In that moment, there was no distinction between Mike Tyson, the boxer, and Mike Tyson, the man who had once been lost. There was only a shared humanity, a mutual understanding that transcended the divide between nations, between pasts, between pain. "I'm just a man," Mike whispered to no one in particular, staring out at the horizon. "A man who has been broken, but who still believes in the power of healing." Ibrahim sat beside him, his eyes focused on the same horizon. "We all are, Mike. We all are." The next morning, as they drove through the dusty roads of Burkina Faso, past fields and homes, and the everyday lives of its people, Mike's thoughts remained with the children, with Maddie, with the pain and the strength that connected them all. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was a part of their story, just as they had become a part of his. When they finally reached the village where Maddie lived, the little boy ran out to meet them, barefoot and full of wonder. The way his face lit up upon seeing Mike wasn't because he was meeting a boxer, but because he was meeting a kindred spirit, someone who had known pain, who had known loss, and who had found a way to rise above it. "Mike Tyson," Maddie whispered, clutching his father's photo, his eyes wide with admiration. "My papa told me you were strong like a lion." Mike kneeled in front of the boy, his own eyes filled with tears. "You're stronger than I ever was," he said softly, his voice breaking. "You have courage that even I didn't have at your age." Maddie blinked, his tears starting to fall. "But I cry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mike smiled gently, his heart full. "That's okay, little man. Even lions cry." Mike Tyson, the once feared heavyweight champion, walked into the school in Ouagadougou without fanfare, his presence speaking louder than any flashy entrance could. The students, many of them barefoot, sat on the dusty ground in faded uniforms, waiting in hushed anticipation. Some held old photos of Mike Tyson, the man who had fought his way to global fame, but now he was here for a different kind of fight. No cameras, no bright lights, just a quiet atmosphere filled with the raw energy of children eager to hear from the man who had survived the same struggles they faced. Mike stood before them, his hands trembling slightly as he looked out over the sea of faces. These weren't just fans. They were the lost and the broken, the dreamers, the ones who, like him, had known pain and hardship. The room was heavy with expectation. Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, stood quietly behind him, watching the moment unfold with a quiet sense of pride. This was not just a speech about triumphs in the ring. It was a message of survival, of rising from nothing, of turning scars into something powerful. Mike took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm not here to talk about my fights in the ring," he began, his voice steady, but full of weight. "I'm here to talk about the fight we all face inside ourselves, the fight to keep going, even when the world tells you to quit, the fight to rise, even when you feel like you've fallen too far to stand back up." He looked around at the students, many of whom had probably never seen a life outside the struggles of poverty and hardship. But here they were, sitting in front of a man who had faced those same demons and found a way to push through. "I know what it feels like to want to give up. I know what it feels like to be angry, to feel like the world has turned its back on you. But I also know that even when it feels like the end, it's really just the beginning." Mike paused, his eyes scanning the room, meeting the gaze of several students who had that same fire in their eyes, the same hunger he had once had. "I was 14, homeless, angry. I didn't know where I was going or if I'd even make it through another day. But I kept going. And I'm here today because I didn't quit, and neither should you." As he spoke, the room was filled with silence, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any applause ever could. The kids were listening, really listening. They understood him in a way that few people could. One of the students, a young boy with wide eyes and a worn-out notebook in hand, stood up, shaking. "You fought for us," he said, his voice full of conviction. "You showed us that we can be more than just our struggles." Mike smiled, the weight of his own pain mixing with a sense of gratitude. "You all are stronger than you think. Life will try to break you down, but the real strength is in getting back up. You have that strength inside you. Just remember you're never alone. And when you feel like giving up, remember this: even lions cry, but they get back up, and they keep fighting." The crowd was moved, some wiping away tears, others nodding along, their eyes shining with a renewed sense of hope. In that moment, Mike Tyson wasn't just a boxer. He was a symbol of resilience, of hope, of the power that comes from healing and understanding. Later, as Mike stood at the front of the room, one of the teachers handed him a letter. It was from the same boy who had hugged him under the mango tree weeks earlier. The letter was simple, but filled with the kind of emotion only a child could express so purely. "Thank you for showing me that even lions cry," it read. Mike carefully folded the letter, clutching it in his hand. This was more than any belt, more than any fight he'd ever won. This was about making a difference. And for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. As the day drew to a close, Mike stood outside in the fading light, his eyes looking out over the quiet streets of Ouagadougou. The children's faces, filled with hope and dreams, lingered in his mind. He had come to Africa seeking something he wasn't sure he would find. But now, standing in this land that had shown him so much, he realized he had found it: redemption, healing, and a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the future of these kids, for the ones who still needed to believe that they, too, could rise from nothing and make it. And in that moment, Mike Tyson knew his true legacy was just beginning. Mike sat quietly, the weight of the moment heavy in the air around him. The translator spoke his words slowly, each one carrying the kind of weight that would resonate in the hearts of those listening. "I used to think I was just a weapon," Mike began, his voice soft but powerful. "I didn't know I had a heart until I listened to a child." He shared his story with the boys in front of him about Maddie, his mother's death, his time in prison, and the battles he fought in the ring because he didn't know how else to fight his pain. As he spoke, tears welled up in the eyes of the boys in the audience, the very ones who had been taught that real men never cried. But here was the most feared boxer in the world, sharing his vulnerabilities, showing them that even the toughest can break down. Mike stood up and walked into the crowd, pointing at one boy in particular. "You," he said, "you think no one sees you, but I do. You're strong even when you feel broken." The boy began to cry, and soon others followed. One by one, the tears fell, and in the back of the room, President Ibrahim Traoré, standing silently, wiped a tear from his own eye. This wasn't just a speech. It was a revolution of hearts. That night, as they sat together under the stars, the two men, each scarred by their own battles, shared a moment of quiet reflection. Mike finally turned to Ibrahim and asked, "Why did you write that letter?" "Mr. President," Ibrahim smiled softly, "because I saw the boy behind the fighter, and I believed the world still needed him." Mike didn't respond. He didn't need to. His throat tightened, words failing him. Ibrahim continued, "You remind my people that strength isn't about fists, it's about rising again and again after life knocks you down." Mike nodded, the weight of the words settling deep within him. "That's all I ever tried to do." The two men clasped hands, not as a politician and a boxer, but as brothers, two survivors from different corners of the world. The next morning, photos from Mike's visit to the school went viral. But it wasn't for fame or publicity. It was because something deeper was happening. People across the world watched clips of Mike hugging children, telling them they mattered, and reminding them that scars were not something to be ashamed of, but proof that they survived. Mike Tyson left Burkina Faso not just as a boxing legend, but as a healer, and Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just a president. He had become a listener of hearts. Back in New York, Mike returned to the studio for a follow-up interview. The producers expected a light-hearted conversation about boxing, but what they got was a moment of silence. The lights dimmed, and Mike, older and wiser, looked at the camera. The host asked, "Mike, what changed you the most in Burkina Faso?" Mike paused, then whispered, "A child and a president." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small drawing. It was from Maddie, the boy from the village, a simple picture of Mike, holding his hand, Ibrahim Traoré standing behind them, both smiling. The studio went still. Mike choked on his words as he spoke again. He doesn't want to fight anymore. He just wants to grow. The audience held their breath. Mike's voice cracked as he said, "That boy gave me peace, and Traoré, he gave me purpose." A tear rolled down Mike's cheek, and for once, the world didn't see the fighter, the legend. They saw a man who had finally begun to heal. After the show, Mike sat alone in his dressing room. A staff member entered, holding a brown envelope. It had just arrived. Mike opened it carefully. It was another letter from President Ibrahim. "Traoré, my brother Mike," it began, "they call me a president. but I am just a man who dreams dreams of healing, dreams of peace. Your visit reminded us all that pain is not the end. It's the beginning if we dare to feel it, not fight it." Mike stared at the paper, the words sinking in. For the first time in years, he whispered a prayer not for himself, but for every broken kid in the world and every leader with a heart. He pressed the letter to his chest. "I was never the baddest man on the planet," he whispered. "I was just a boy waiting to be heard." And finally, someone listened. 1 week, that's all it took to turn pain into purpose. Mike Tyson stood on the balcony of a building in Harlem, watching a small group of kids sparring below. He wasn't their coach. He was just present. When one of the boys tripped, Mike didn't laugh. He walked down, lifted him up, and said, "Every fall teaches you how to rise." His phone buzzed. It was a photo from Burkina Faso. It was Maddie, smiling, standing beside a brand new boxing gym. The gym was named the Tyson Hope Center, sponsored by the Burkina Faso government and signed by President Traoré himself. Mike closed his eyes. The world had once called him a monster. Now, a boy across the ocean saw him as a mentor. And for Mike, that was enough. If this story moved you even a little, please like to show love. Subscribe for more true stories that heal, and comment below what moment made you cry the most. Let's fill this space with love, strength, and second chances. Because even the toughest fighters need someone to believe in them. Until the next story, stay human, stay kind,